Reconfirming that we do have quorum of the board. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the first item on our agenda, which is opening remarks. So I just want to thank everyone for your patience for being here with us this afternoon. It's a really full house, so thanks for being here. There's a number of things I do want to say. I do want to really say thank you to the staff, to Christy and staff, because we are going through a sunset process right now. There's a lot of unknowns, but we're going to hear an update from Christy today on all of that. But I know that she and staff have really been working hard to try to get things moving for our board. So for all of you who might have questions about sunset, hopefully some of those questions will be answered today. The other thing I want to mention is that we have a former board member here with us today. I should have two, but we have a special presentation for Joe Federico. And so I want to call Joe up. For those of you who have been with us in attendance for quite some time, you're familiar with Joe. He's spent a number of great years on our board contributing in many, many different ways. As a school owner, his expertise and knowledge, we're super sad that he was not reappointed, and his depth of knowledge is really going to be missed as we move forward. So I do have something from Department of Consumer Affairs honoring Joseph Federico for ending his term as a board member with us. And I'm just going to read through it super quickly. Whereas Joseph Federico has been an industry board member for the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology for more than 7 years, and whereas Joseph Federico, while on the board, has served on the following committees: disciplinary review, education and outreach, enforcement and inspection, legislative and budget, licensing and examination. And whereas Joseph Federico has earned the trust, respect, and friendship of all who have worked with him now, therefore be it resolved that President Lisa Tong, on behalf of the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology, does hereby honor Joseph Federico for his years of public participation, thanking him for his tireless efforts on behalf of not only the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology, but the state of California, and extends best wishes for success and fulfillment in all of his endeavors. And be it further resolved that a suitably prepared copy of this resolution be presented to Joseph Federico. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Should I go around or should I? I'm going to go around to Joe.
Greatly honored. First time I've really standing outside. But yeah, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate this. It's quite an honor.
Thank you. All right.
I just want to say thank you, Joe, for all your help. You helped me a lot. I appreciate it.
So actually, board member remarks are next. So if anybody else would like to share any remarks, please do so. No remarks. All right. So with that, with no board member remarks, I'm going to move on to public comment. And again, this is public comment for items not on the agenda. I understand that there are a number of folks here today who would like to make public comment. I'm going to respectfully ask that you keep it short today, given the number of items on the agenda. If you are sharing comments that are comments that somebody else prior to you has already shared, I ask that you add your name to the comment so that we try to streamline this and not repeat too much. And if possible, please keep your comments to about a minute. Okay, so I'm going to open up the floor for public comment right now.
Hi, my name is Ken Chu. I'm the owner of International Beauty College, which is in San Francisco. Our school code is 06008. And our students have been applying for their test dates since December, and they all been withhold, or it's under review. since December. So every time I call or send an email, it says the application being reviewed, and you'll hear from the board soon. And my last communication was in April 10th with Christine Jones, and then she stated that the board should have information to you soon. That's all the information I have. So, and then we have quite a few students here that is representing what, they're waiting for their test dates. So I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Moreno. I'm Vice President at Bix Barber College, and I'm here to, bring to your attention that I ordered the health and safety textbooks and workbooks, which we have been providing for our students. We've ordered the physical copies back in the end of February and have yet to receive said textbooks. We have emailed, and they have assured us that they have been shipped. But again, this is several months down the line. I would hope that this would better in the years to come, being that we are meant to give this information to our students. So in future aspect, I hope that the books are sent out in a more timely manner. Also, the state board laws and regulations have been ordered, and same thing have yet to be received. So again, I hope in future aspect that we receive these books at a more timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Winnie Fong. I also am from International Beauty College in San Francisco. I'm one of the students. I'm in the esthetician program. We also, a lot of us had applied, like what earlier on, like what we actually mentioned. He had already said that we've been waiting. I wanted to know if it's possible if we can actually get an actual date instead of letting us know review, or like we're on a review, we don't have a time frame. A lot of us are actually have been waiting possibly 5 to 6 months already. So if that's possible to find out an actual date, hopefully today, if that's okay. I also have my fellow peer classmates. Could we also add into the name with also in the International Beauty School College? My name is Winnie Fong. So my class.
Sure. So if other students have the same comment as you,
Yes,
they can go
please.
ahead and line up and just
Yes.
state their name clearly.
Okay.
And please go ahead and
Do
add
you
that.
need them to also say what license they're also actually are taking the test for, or taking the test for,
Sure.
like cosmetologist or okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Her name is Ren Lian Huang. His first name Ren Lian, last name Wang, and it's cosmetology. Last year December 20th, first term got his exam, but the report is reading test. It's almost 5 months and not got a schedule. Just always called her, wait. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Yajun Deng. Right now I'm studying cosmetology course in International Beauty College in San Francisco. So yeah, so many people are waiting, and then we just want to know the reason. Thank you.
Hi, afternoon. My name is Yan Qing Wang. My program is a cosmetology, so I already at the test, but at the not time, give me the test test the time that day. Maybe okay. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Damping Yamadas. I'm grammar is cosmetology, so I'm still waiting 5 months now get the test ready. So I want to know what there for me. Thank you.
My name is Julian Huang. My program is manicure.
Hi, my name is Tian. My program is academics. So I'm the same situation. I'm waiting for the text.
Hi everyone, my name is Na Miao. My program is aesthetics. Same situation. We're still waiting for the test date. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Liang Pen. My program is cosmetology, and I applied 3 months. I already test. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hai Chen Tu. I come from International College San Francisco. I recent something I want the text because I waiting 4 months ago. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yang Xue. My program is a customer college. I waiting the writing text is a 4 months half. Thank you.
Hi, my name Nguyễn Lan Thảo, manicure.
My name Ngọc Hoa Lô, manicure. Yeah.
Hi, my name Thi 13 Bùi, manicure.
Hello, my name is Xiao Chonghi. I program is manicure. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Jia Ming Huang. I am a manicure student. Thank you.
Hi, my name Quang Cường Nguyễn. I'm manicure.
My name is Kim Sang Nguyen. Study manicure.
Hi, my name Úc Trần, manicure.
Hello, this is Jaeyoung Hwang. My program is cosmetology.
Hi everyone, my name is Myung Suk Ko. My program is the cosmetology student.
My name Ngọc Trinh Phạm, manicure.
Hi, my name Nguyễn Thị Thu Hoa, manicure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys hearing us out. I also have a list of everyone's name that has mentioned their names and what program. We have a list here if you'd like to take this.
Sure, we'll take that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, additional public comment?
Hi there, Wendy Cochran, California Aesthetic Alliance, California Esthetician Advocacy. I recently communicated with members of the Barber Cosmo folks about licenses that are being held by franchise owners, and they are not allowing the licensees to take them with them. Many of us work for multiple places, and they are holding them either at the front desk away from their work areas, or they are telling them to contact the board and just get a duplicate, which is successful. Everybody's paying their $10 and getting a duplicate license. And so I don't know how the board would address something like this. Would it be to have a better understanding with the establishment owners that these are part of our, what we take with us every day so we can perform our services elsewhere? But it seems to be a problem because we have issues where young ladies and a couple gentlemen that have communicated in our group of 4,300 people now, that they are being written up at their jobs because they don't know the regulation that that license is supposed to stay with the practitioner as they move from room to room, and also when they leave for the day if they do have another job and need to take it with them. So they are being disciplined and sometimes often lose their job, and this is one of the things that they are being written up for, is for asking to have their license to be able to bring it with them back and forth between jobs. So I don't know how the board would address this. It seems to be a big problem because, the easy answer is make a photocopy or just contact the board and they'll send you a second one. But we know that there are regulations in here that say that you're only supposed to have one, similar to a driver's license. So I feel that, since now people are kind of getting pressured at their jobs for doing the right thing and asking to bring their license with them, I think that this is a communication that the board probably needs to address with the owners or whoever is a licensee, and make sure that these folks aren't losing their jobs in the meanwhile. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Fred Jones, Professional Beauty Federation of California. A little birdie dropped this off on your desks. Just wanted to let you and those on the webcast know that our 19th annual Welcome to Our World event at the state capitol is a week from today, from 3 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Details are on our website, but also on the invitation I left each of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patty Barnes, I'm an instructor at Solano Community College. And talking about the licenses, we have to have our licenses posted when we teach. And when we leave, it's just some instructors teach at different facilities, like I had taught also at Skyline. So I was having to move my license back and forth, and then I still have a salon, and I'd have to take it there. So it's remembering to take this license. So I called to get a duplicate, knowing that that really technically was against the law. And I asked the young man on the phone, I said, well, then what do we do? What do we do? I said, that's such a gray area. And that year they did provide me with a duplicate license, which made life a little bit easier. But still in all, I think that there needs to be something written concerning our licenses, that we have to have them posted. I understand that, but maybe we can get more license copied, instead of making photocopies. Also, as an advocate for the students, I have a question. I know that we make accommodations for students who have special needs in the written portion of the exam. Those very same students very often have need for accommodation in the practical part. What are we doing as a board to make sure that the needs of all the students are being met? I've got a young man right now who I think the next time he goes, I'm going to tutor him, but it'll be his 5th or 6th time. And he's autistic, and he can do the work. He just has some special needs, and I think that we need to look at that population, because we do have a lot of different learners, which, is really a gift, but we have to be able to accommodate them. And then thirdly, I wanted to address that I also own Rent-A-Kit. We are a business that facilitates the students with their state board kits to go to state board. And it's a very interesting business. If you ever wanted to get a bird's eye view of what's going on in the testing world and how successful the students are being, I invite you to come to Rent-A-Kit. We open at 5:30 in the morning. And I can say it's shameful the way some school operates and some apprenticeship programs. I know them well, and I just think that we need to be held accountable to a higher standard for the students. I don't think a student should have to go back to state board 5 and 6 times. I think they should be able to come out of school, go to board, get a license, start working and paying off their student loans. So this is an issue that's not going to go away. I think that we maybe jumped the gun a little bit too fast and didn't have some really good solid programs in line for the apprenticeship programs, because there's some that are very, very good and there's some that are very, very bad, as in any situation. But there's some schools out there also, and I traveled with NACAS as an academic specialist. So the writing is very easily read on the wall if you know what you're looking for. So I would ask the board that you take that into consideration. And please, anytime you'd like to, come and visit us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other public comments? If none, I will be moving on to the next agenda item. We are actually going to have to move agenda item number 12 up. So that will be actually the discussion on instructor requirements for private beauty schools. We have someone here who will be speaking on this agenda item, and I'm going to turn that over to Christy to introduce.
So in your packet, we did provide some information that, and we do have representatives from the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary, but as we all know, we do not have any oversight over instructors within any school setting. And so the board had asked us to have this discussion at one of our last meetings. The Bureau of Private Post-Secondary does have requirements for instructors, and with that, I will introduce Dr. Michael Marion, who's the Bureau Chief for Bureau of Private Post-Secondary, as well as, trying to remember, Robert Bayless, who is over quality of education, if I have that correct. Okay. And they're both from the Bureau.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? All right. Well, thank you for the invitation to come and chat with you today and have this discussion. Chrissy sent over the invitation, and we gladly accepted to come over and answer any questions that may be needed. My name is Dr. Michael Marion. I'm the Bureau Chief for Private Post-Secondary. I've been there about a year and a half, and we have Robert Bales with us, who is the Chief of over Quality of Education and the Annual Reports Unit. And so we're open to answer any questions that the board may have of us.
I guess I'll start us off if my fellow board members don't have anything just yet. Can you actually go over just some of the requirements and your oversight of instructors? As you know, our board has been having many issues with schools throughout the state. We've been working very closely with your department with some success this year, and we're really happy that that relationship has moved forward positively. We do understand that there are several schools that we have shut down and are looking to inspect further, and we are finding a number of pieces of data that indicate that we might continue to find even some more troubling situations. And so, our concern as a board is specifically consumer protection, but when we are pushing students out who are passing tests because they're taught to pass the test but do not actually understand the rules and regulations of the board, we are finding it to be very problematic for consumer protection reasons, but also our concern is for the students as consumers as well, who are paying for education that is not translating into successful careers. And so, our question primarily has to do with what kind of oversight your bureau is actually implementing for instructors.
Sure. So for non-degree faculty and non-degree programs, we look at a combination of 3 years of education, experience, or training, or it could be 3 years of education, 3 years of training, 3 years of experience. In the case of BBC programs, it's typically the 3 years of experience that meets the requirement for hire. We evaluate that through various documents that come to us through the licensing process, through the licensing application. We verify all instructors to see if they do meet the 3-year requirement. And we usually look at resumes and transcripts if necessary if college is a factor, to validate that 3 years. And then at some point when our compliance inspectors go out, they look for documentation of that same thing. So if an instructor was hired because he or she has 3 years of experience, then they're going to look into the faculty files to make sure there's documentation of that.
Yes, hi. Let me ask you a quick question. It's the California Code regulations, instructors in an educational program not leading to a degree. Number one, the second sentence. you're requiring that these individuals, instructors, have experience, education, and training in their subject matter. But it says here that if an instructor does not possess the required 3 years of experience, education, and training in the subject area they are teaching, the institution shall document the qualification the instructor possesses that are equivalent to the minimum qualifications. What are equivalencies to experience, education, and training?
Actually, that's a great question. We actually met as a unit, quality of education unit, about 4 or 5 months ago, and because that question was posed by our compliance inspectors, and I think we came up with one single example, and that was for a criminal justice program, and it was for an individual who maybe didn't have the 3 years, but had some type of significant award because of his accomplishments in the field. But for BBC programs, we don't see that. We don't see any. The schools have not, to my knowledge, and I've been with the Bureau for 4 years, have not demonstrated anything that would be equivalent of the 3 years that we're looking for.
And they've brought these equivalencies before you, and you've denied them? Or the school has denied them, it's not gotten as far as you?
I'm not sure of the question, sorry.
Well, I'm saying, have these equivalencies been denied at the school level, or have you seen things they've asked to use as equivalencies that you've denied? They
would be denied in a licensing application. But, understand that once a school becomes licensed, they can, they're free to operate, so they can hire more faculty. And the Bureau doesn't require them to run those faculty through us for, individual qualifications. So if they tell us, we're going to hire these 5 instructors to get the program started, we would look at their qualifications, and if they didn't meet the 3 years, again, the school would have to demonstrate, the ability for the school to make that exception, which again we've not seen that. And then the compliance inspectors, once they get out, typically a few years later after the school's been operating, they would do the same thing. They would look at the faculty files and make sure that the instructors were qualified.
I don't know if you know the answer to this question because you deal with requirements for private beauty schools. Do you know, like, the community colleges, what requirements they require for instructors?
Not off the top of my head. Like community colleges are typically more stringent in their requirements. For most, at least for the degree programs. For non-degree programs, I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
Do you oversee the apprentice programs?
We do not.
Can you actually tell us about what documentation you asked for the instructors?
Sure. In most cases, it's going to be a resume because the resume outlines an individual's career and their qualifications based on experience, and that's mostly what we see. If their qualifications are based in part on education, then we would ask for an academic transcript from the college or university that the individual went to. It can, if it's based on their own training, maybe they went to a BBC school at one point in time, we would ask for documentation of that, which again could be a transcript or proof of training document or something like that.
On continuing education courses required by the instructors, you say there is continuing education required in 3 different areas there. Do you have how often they're required, the hours they should put in, or requirements that they prove it to the school or you for audit?
We actually do not. That is one of the areas that we're actually working on right now. We're revising our minimum operating standards language, and we're adding quite a bit of information that wasn't there before, and that's going to be one of the requirements because accrediting agencies typically require that those types of documentation or those types of activities on an annual basis, and so that's what we're currently looking at. Obviously, we're still in the initial stages of doing the revision, but that's what we like to see when we go out there, and we recommend it. But again, our regulations don't require it. So
You recommend annual?
correct. Yes. Yeah.
Do you look at the applicant's record from the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology? Do you work with our staff to look at any history of violations?
We currently do not do that. I mean, we do work with the staff. So if it's really kind of anecdotally, if we see a faculty member that we recognize as being from another school and having issues, then we'll contact BBC and kind of work through those issues. But typically that's not part of our licensing application process.
But the requirement is that they are a current licensee from our board as well. Is that correct, or is there no requirement of that?
For the faculty?
Yes.
Yeah, the Bureau does not have a regulation that says that they have to hold current licensure. And that's for
Okay.
any of our programs.
Okay.
Yes. Correct, yes.
In another state.
Correct.
Who oversees the apprentice schools? Yeah, that's a whole different state agency.
Oh, I wasn't sure. If this was
Yeah,
part of it.
Division of Apprenticeship Standards.
Any other questions from my fellow board members?
Just one, we've noticed that recently there's been more sharing of information and working together, and I think we all appreciate that. That's
do
good.
we.
That's good for us both.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anything else? If no further questions, then I'm going to just say thank you for being here to answer some of our questions. I'm sure that we will have more questions as we continue to go through most of today's agenda, actually. And I'm sure that through staff, we will continue to communicate.
Absolutely. And thank you.
Thank you
for
very
the
much.
you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you for the support that we've also been receiving from BBC. I think we, as you said, have been doing great work to work together, and I think we will continue to do great work. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess we have public comment on this agenda item, so if we can have you remain for that, that would be appreciated. Or do they have to stay for the public comment? BPP? Because they can't respond, right? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You don't have to remain. That was my mistake. Thank you, though.
You did see his leg, right?
Up and down, up and down.
So sorry about that.
Wendy Cochran, California Aesthetic Alliance. One of my questions for the schools would be is why do we have contractors coming into the schools and teaching the students out of scope things like microneedling, like permanent makeup, like dermaplaning, and like fibroblast? That is something that is happening, and students, because we also have students in my group as well, students are learning these things and anticipating that they'll be able to get their license and go out and perform these services, and they are blatantly out of scope services. And I'd like to know how the schools and how the board are going to be able to figure that out. Because if you're not requiring a license, because I would assume that anybody that's licensed would know that we can't do microneedling, and if you are from out of state, there's people can do microneedling and dermaplaning in other states, so we can't hold them accountable there. But they're really misleading these students and allowing them to do these and perform these services in a school on school clock time and perform the services. So. That's something that really is concerning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Jamie Schrabeck, Precision Nails. Thanks for the opportunity to provide a different perspective on the quality and value of education and those that we entrust to provide it. I want to address 3 quick examples of teaching credentials. The first is my PhD, the culmination of graduate coursework, original research, and a dissertation. Having completed that, that credential qualifies me to teach at any community college, any university, anywhere in the country, and it never expires. As long as I'm teaching my field and I meet the requirements that the school asks of me, then I'm good to go. The next is a multiple subject teacher credential. I'm embarrassed to say that it expired in 2003, but at this time I wouldn't even know how to go about renewing it other than to follow what they ask for. But at the time I had to have a background check, I had to pass a test, and of course complete teacher training. And I could have been hired or still could be hired by a private school and not have any teacher credential at all. And of course, that's only specific to California. The third example I have is I actually was able to dig up my instructor certificate for manicuring that was issued by the Council for Private Post-Secondary Vocational Education. So that was one of the earlier iterations of this agency. And that had expired in 1998. And I don't even remember exactly what was required of me then to get this particular credential. But of course, there was no requirement to get any CE at the time that I can recall. And unlike with a teaching credential that you would have for multiple subject, you would have to get so many hours of CE. So my point is that we have these credentials, and if we are going to take some action, if the board is going to take some action, that would essentially give instructors this opportunity to teach to school. If you go through with this, and you haven't proposed anything yet, but if we move forward with that, my concern is that any sort of instructor license within cosmetology is going to lend a sheen of credibility to schools whose business models may be to sell hours and proofs of training. And you can't separate the two. And not to say that the instructors aren't fabulous cosmetologists or estheticians or manicurists, and that they aren't really great at teaching, but a student who's buying hours isn't even going to be there to benefit from that instruction because they're not present. So that is my concern, that this is just one piece of the situation, and unless we're able to take it as a whole, that it's not going to solve anything. It's just going to make it, something that a school could advertise that they have when, in terms of their management, they're doing something that's fraudulent. Thank you.
Thank you.
You asked a requirement of a community college, you have to have a degree and multiple years of experience. And within the college, you have to do continuing education within the college district.
Thank you. Any other public comments on agenda item number 12?
I have a quick comment. Just want to make it sure we understand that ultimately somebody can go to school for a cosmetology license, and being in school that time gives them experience to apply to the Bureau to be an instructor.
Okay.
So it could be something we might, as we journey through our next 12 months, it might be something that definitely needs to be talked about more.
Okay. Any other public comments? If none, then I'm going to move on to agenda item number 6, Executive Officer's Report. So I'm going to hand that over to Christy.
Okay, in your packets, we have our regular statistics to report on. We start off with our licensing statistics with our applications received. You can see that we've actually started to increase some in this most recent quarter. We had that decline when the Maranello schools closed, and we think that's starting to even out now, and we're seeing the increase coming back. Next page is our examination results, and then we've also added, at the request of the board from the last meeting, we've added a historic review, and it's a lot of numbers here, but we wanted to show kind of the historic pass rates that we've had on our examinations by language.
Question on the examination results. Is that an aberration, under written examinations, Spanish language barber with a pass rate of 15%?
That's correct. The new barber exam went into place maybe 2 months ago. So we'll always see a decline, and now hopefully it'll start to come back up. Hopefully. We'll talk a little more in the next agenda item about some of our Spanish results. The next item is our licenses issued, our historic view of licenses issued, and then our current license population. We currently have 620,787 active licensees in California, or at least licensed in California. And then we have our DRC stats, which of course continue to be wonderful thanks to all of your support, but our DRC is still moving along without a backlog.
Who's ever doing those Southern DRCs are really good.
Oh. Right? Oh, I thought you meant the staff. You mean the committee. And then we've added also our interpreter statistics as well, so that you can see the types of the number of cases that receive interpretation services at DRC. Next, we have our enforcement statistics. And then we have our complaints received, and then we also added in our complaints received, or our licensing of the category through the last 4 fiscal years, so that you can see the trend in that as well.
Christy, do we have any kind of historical insight as to some of the things we may have done as a board that may have helped decrease the number of violations that we're issuing? Have we seen, a difference between how we're enforcing now from maybe 10 years ago?
Data-wise,
Or
I
just
think
insight,
so.
anecdotally,
I mean, I
even?
can tell you we've made huge progress with foot spas. Huge. When the bill, not only did we have a task force set up to establish the guidelines for how we disinfect the foot spas, but when a bill went into place that allowed us to do the immediate suspension, we have statistics on that we can provide, and we can show how many we had in the beginning, and it's very few and far between. And so just so you know, when an inspector sees a foot spa that's so dirty that it raises to a higher level, they actually send myself a picture, and we make the decision immediately to put them on, to suspend their license. And if I get one a month now, it's surprising. We still do. But it was every day we were getting photos of, and these are raised to a higher, it's a $500 fine per chair. So these are items that we think are worse than getting a $500 fine. So that's been a huge difference. We've changed our fine schedule several times, and that I think has been a difference as well with the numbers of violations and how we've increased them and readjusted, making a higher fine on some of the more egregious violations.
Okay.
So we could put something together for the next meeting.
Yeah, it'd just be nice to see how we've progressed,
Right.
especially if there's any kind of correlation between number of public complaints we're receiving in correlation to our enforcement statistics. It would be nice to understand what we're doing well. Thank you.
I have a quick question about the interpreter services provided.
Uh-huh.
And it's more of probably a question for my fellow members who maybe served on them. I see nobody requested anybody in January, February, or March. Do you get a sense that people should have requested people and they didn't? Or was there just no need? Or it just seems like when I've served, we've needed and they've been provided. And so, or is this just an anomaly, or are people not requesting?
I think it's often people don't request.
So there is still, you're finding the need, it's just nobody's requested. Okay.
And a lot of times at DRC, they bring, it's been historic that they bring people with them to help them.
So I'm wondering if we need to somehow
Right.
flag the opportunity earlier in the process to people, that they know that this is a service that is provided to help them.
That's a really good point, Andrea. Is there any way we can do something either an email even to establishments or through DCA's, our public information officer working within language media to get the word out?
We have just done that.
Oh, awesome.
So what we have done is we've put together a press release that talks about the services. And we're going to have that translated, and then we have a lot of contacts in some of the non-English language communities that we're going to send that press release out and hopefully get the word out more on that.
Great.
Excuse me. So moving on, next is our budget update, which we're going to have a budget presentation in a few minutes, but nothing out of the ordinary for me to report. And then we do have our outreach update. We did have staff participate in, we called it our road show. They went out to the desert, what you call it? They did 3 events in 2 days? 24 hours. In 24 hours, they did 3 events with an organization called TODEC, which is Training Occupational Development Education Communities, Victorville, Paris, and Coachella. Not during the festival. And it was very successful. It was primarily with Spanish speaking, is that right? And they had, through the Department of Consumer Affairs Public Information, they connected with us and attended with us as well. And those over 150 people attended, and it was very successful. We also are continuing to work on a new campaign for Look for the License, and you'll see when people signed in, we have some new little flyers that we've developed. Well, DCA helped us with developing those, and it's kind of something we're going to try to get out so that people can really start paying attention to look for a license when they go to get those services. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at those, make sure you do. We have staff that are going to be doing a senior rally down at the Capitol. We did it last year, and so we'll do it again this year. It's a pretty big event that they hold, and we have a information table as well for consumers. And then, as I announced to all of you, we now have an Instagram account. Yay! I wish I could say more.
Your follower count, do you just subtract the board members from that or not?
I'm sorry? Oh.
Or do you pad your stats with us in the followers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion on that? That if there is in-language material that you can post about, I would encourage you to share that on Facebook and Instagram. I don't think people realize that there are folks on both of those platforms who do use it in other languages. So
it's a great idea. And then lastly, we have our results from our renewal questionnaire that asks if their working status in California. And that's our most recent quarter of those results. That's all I have.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christy. So do we need to do public comment on that? Okay, so public comment on the executive officer's report. Would anyone like to share anything?
I don't know that it really has anything to do with that, but when you start talking about language and students not doing well, I think part of the problem is that students who speak a secondary or speak another language besides English, the book that they have on the station when they get ready to test is correct grammar of either Spanish or whatever the language it is. And very often, the students don't understand that because they do not speak correct Spanish. I don't speak correct English. I might not have as difficult a time, but a lot of times the students, they don't feel connected to that because there's so much slang in different areas that they just don't speak proper. And I think that when we as a state, I'm not saying we should diminish what our expectations are either we're gonna have to raise the level of the schools to start teaching these students so they have a shot at passing the examination in proper grammar. I think that's one of the things we're really gonna have to work on, especially in the Hispanic community and in the Asian community.
Any other public comment?
Hello, my name is Kevin Nguyen from San Diego, California, California Bar and Beauty College. And I've noticed that ever since you updated the new rules and testing, the pass rate has been dropped by 10% since last year. And I just want to point that out. I don't know if it's examiners sometimes, or maybe it's the new rules. I just want to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? If none, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 7. We have a guest with us from DCA, Karen Munoz, who's here to give an overview of DCA's budget process. So welcome, Karen. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. Is this on? Is this on? Yeah, my name is Karen Munoz. I am one of the budget managers over with the DCA Budget Office, and I am here to provide you with a budget process overview. I know that was requested at the last board meeting, and so to help you understand more of how the budget works through, how we create the budget, or how the governor's budget is created, I will go ahead. You guys have a document in your packet that gives you the 3 stages of the annual budget process. And with that, we have our first stage, that is where the budget is developed. We use what we call an incremental budgeting system, and so with a baseline, a base of our current appropriation or current allocation that the board has, we make incremental changes. And this is what we do during the fall process. These are usually made through budget letters that are provided by the Department of Finance. You will see some of those are annually. The retirement rate adjustment, we have employee comp adjustments, general salary increase adjustments. Those will all make incremental adjustments to your guys' current budget. We also have the budget change proposal process that starts early in the spring and goes through to November, December, and that is also included in the governor's proposed budget, which is in January. That is all part of the first stage of the budget process, the budget building process. And then in the second stage, we have what we call the enactment process. And that is once the governor's budget is proposed, Jan 10th, that budget then goes into the legislature and is reviewed at both in the Senate and the Assembly side. And that's where they provide suggestions, and that then becomes signed into a bill and becomes law, which then we have it enacted, and that's usually towards the end of June, July 1. In July 1, then we have the what we call the implementation process. So that is where, here in the budget office, we review, we create projections for the board, and we basically keep track of the board's spending and provide feedback to the board on anything that we see could possibly create some kind of a concern or anything. With the board's budget, we haven't really seen any concerns, but there are lots of changes. The budget process is a year process, so we do go through lots of different stages and incremental changes to your budget.
I have a question for you in relationship to our specific board's budget. Our budget for the upcoming year is developed by your staff and then goes to DCA, becomes part of DCA? How does that work?
It's set in by the governor. It starts with the governor.
Correct, it's actually the governor's budget,
Right.
and the board's part is just a portion of the governor's budget.
All
So it
boards and
is
agencies are
correct.
treated
So
the
it's
same way
all-
in that.
Right, and so
Okay.
you have a allotment of that said budget, and so we could make changes, so that during the budget change proposal process, during that side, that process, if there are any resources that the board might need, whether this be any issues that you guys might need additional resources for enforcement, licensing, that goes through the budget change process where we could increase your funding appropriation or your position.
Budget change process is during the implementation period of the budget?
That, well, we do start requesting resources from the board, or what we call the concept stage. That has already initially started, and the budget change proposals are requested mid-year, and then we go through the review process internally, and then once those, depending on the outcome of those, then it goes into the governor's budget.
Is there a drop dead or lockout date when we can't exceed past that period?
Currently, all budget change proposals that we are going to be reviewing this fiscal year are for 2021. So any changes that you need for 2021, that's going through right now. We have already completed the budget change proposal process for 1920. Those are in going through hearings, and those should be enacted come July 1.
Gotcha.
So, but if you do need additional resources, that's what the budget change process is for.
Gotcha.
Is that where something can be looked at for increase in salary for our inspectors?
No. I mean, the budget office has a portion of that, because obviously we wouldn't, if it goes through the union through their bargaining unit, which is happening now. But, and obviously we wouldn't, if, it's gotta go hand in hand in a sense, because we wanna make sure we have money.
Sure. Correct, and the state just recently went through a general salary increase for a lot of the bargaining units. Continually going through, actually.
Any other questions?
Thank you for coming out.
No problem. We're always available. If you guys have any other questions, you can reach out to Christine. She can reach to us.
You should put it in perspective, so that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public comment? No. Do I have any public comment on this agenda item? If no public comment, I will move on to agenda item number 8, which is approval of board meeting minutes from February 11th of this year.
Move that we approve the minutes.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Public comment? There's no public comment. I'm going to move for a vote, starting from my left.
Steve,
This is public comment on the minutes from last meeting.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Andrew Drapkin, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to agenda item number 9, appointment of committee members to the Health and Safety Advisory Committee.
So the board has already established the makeup of the Health and Safety Advisory Committee, but we do have 2 members that, from the board that serve on that committee, and we would like to get those 2 members voted on today because we'd like to get our first committee meeting of this year going. So it's up to the board of who would like to serve this year.
Any volunteers?
I can.
Jackie? I'm willing to serve.
That's 2.
So that's 2. Anyone else interested?
Okay, good to go.
All right, so do we need a vote? No? Public comment or no? Okay, so moving on to item number 10, update on the sunset review.
So I have a brief update for Sunset. As you know, we were scheduled for February to have our hearing, and it was postponed. We anticipate that an extension will be put into a bill soon, and that we will have a hearing set hopefully soon as well. And that is to have some in-depth discussions about oversight of the industry. So there is several vehicles. We sunset on January 1, which would mean we would become a bureau. Is that right?
Oh, it'd be like a program under DC.
Like a program, yeah, not necessarily a bureau.
Yeah.
It would remain intact, but it wouldn't be a board. It would go under the director as a program. And so that we have to have an extension put into a bill for in our current session, which we understand that there are several vehicles out there that can be used to extend our sunset. It's just negotiations are going on how long and when the next hearing, or when our hearing, first of possible many, will take place. We hope to know very soon, and as soon as I know, you will know.
Are we the only board that's in this situation right now?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, do I need to do public comment on this? Okay, so I'm going to open this up for public comment.
Wendy Cochran, California Estheticians. Obviously, we have a vested interest in this because our scope has not been reviewed since, 1978? And we have a lot of things that are pending. We are very curious to be able to move along and be able to provide the services that are modern to 2019 and beyond. So if statement is going to be made to the board, how will the rest of us know when sunset is going to be happening?
Well, as soon as there's a date scheduled, it's public information. So it's something I think the legislature even asks us to post that on our website. So it'll definitely.
It'll go up on
yes.
the website. Excellent. It's one of my favorite websites. But
well, thank you.
I'm on it every day. It's great.
Yep, mine was on.
Additional public comment on sunset review. Is it regarding sunset review? We can only take comments on sunset review. So if it's not regarding sunset, thank you. Okay, if nothing else, then I will move on to agenda item number 11, which is a discussion on and possible actions regarding our Spanish language exam pass rates.
So within your packets are two separate items. The first is an update on the recommendations from the Spanish language task force. And there were 5 recommendations basically set forth from that task force. One was to align board regulations with the Division of Apprenticeship Standards. And as we'll talk about here in just a minute, we have a lot to do with the Division of Apprenticeship Standards and with looking at kind of not new information, but information in a different way. We definitely need to work with a lot more than what we recommended at the Spanish language task force. So that is ongoing, and we're hoping at the next board meeting we'll have even further update with some conversations that we've had with that agency. Next is obviously requiring student enrollment. We definitely felt that would assist us in kind of talking to students up front instead of after they completed school. And this was a recommendation in our sunset report. So that's definitely will be something that will carry into these discussions with the legislature. have NIC do a data analysis to determine if the pass rates would improve. That information was sent to you, and we do have public copies that we can make available. We did not post those online yet because we weren't positive that it was public, but they are here actually and have told me that that is public. So as soon as Marcine gets back in, I'll make sure that we have copies of that with us. And then exploring toggle testing for sure is something that we would like to do in our next contract for computer-based testing. It can't be done right currently at this time, but we are getting ready to go through that process. And then lastly on this was talking about translations possibly being at a lower grade level. And then I've added a statement from the exam developers for the NIC test, which is that examinations are translated at a grade level to a grade level, or at a word, or no, they're not translated to a grade level or word for word. They're appropriately trans-adapted. So before we talk about all of that, I think we should I'll talk about my next item in that packet.
Sure.
And that is this information. In talking about Spanish pass rates, what we did was we pulled out, we looked at all the schools that have students taking the test in Spanish. And what we found was just very different sets of data. We have schools that are approved to teach in Spanish who are doing fairly well, and we have lots of students who did not go to schools that are approved to teach in Spanish that are still taking the test in Spanish. That doesn't necessarily mean they didn't have a Spanish-speaking instructor, because they could still be getting assistance, but they're not required per our regulation to provide Spanish textbooks, or they probably don't have Spanish textbooks, or the translation guide that was provided. So we have provided with some statistics in your packet, and we kind of broke it out with a 60% pass rate. That's very arbitrary. We just picked that out of the air, 60%. And we've, in your packet is the information that we found that I believe is a little bit alarming. We found that schools not only are doing very poorly on the Spanish test, on the written test, but they're also doing very poorly on the practical test. So we have a separate data that we pulled before the board meeting, but not in this packet, is the pass rate for Spanish-speaking students on the practical exam is in 30% as well. So they're not only failing the written, they're also failing the practical as well.
So if we look into reweighting things, that's not going to really have any kind of effect.
I think that could be, that's debatable. On the second page of the attachment is, though, information that I believe is even more alarming, which are, I'm sorry, actually the third page, the apprentice program. The apprentice program is, in my opinion, failing greatly. We have found that the majority of apprentices that are taking the test are actually Spanish speaking. And so we have, they're failing at alarming, they're 33% for most apprentice programs, and it's definitely catering to the Spanish-speaking community. Whereas you have schools that are approved to teach in Spanish, and some of them are doing very well. And we even have schools that their students are taking the Spanish exam that aren't approved to teach in Spanish, but they're still doing well. But when you put in all these apprentice numbers into that data, it skews the pass-fail rate, because we don't separate it when we give you your board report. That's not separated out. So the apprentice program we had 839 individuals take that test in 2018, and only 33% passed. And they're taking it multiple times, and they're still not passing. And so, to me, it's alarming. We hadn't pulled this out before. I'm not sure why we hadn't pulled it out before, but when we looked at it this way, it kind of has shown us what we've thought, and that the apprentice program needs some significant work. They're not required to have a textbook So the exam is developed referencing textbooks, yet the apprentices go and we put them into a salon and they don't even have to a requirement for a textbook. So they're not ever seeing the terms used in those textbooks that are used on the exam. They're never seeing that. So and it's not just Spanish. They're failing in every language. So in the apprentice program, and again, they're not getting textbooks. They have a curriculum to follow that is similar to schools, but the completion requirement is just a completion requirement. It's the training's done on the job in the salon. It's not something that we are able to enforce because we're going out and doing health and safety inspections. And as you know, who've sat on DRC, which I think all of you have now, we're seeing apprentices in salons by themselves all the time. So they're putting apprentices in these salons by themselves, and then we're expecting them to pass a test, which is impossible. So,
Sorry, are they passing the practical, or is it
most are not passing the practical.
both?
Right.
Obviously, there's serious alarms raised.
Right.
There's serious alarms raised to what's happening in our apprenticeship program. How much of this, I know we haven't talked about possible solutions there, but how much of this is correctable just through our action, and how much has to go through the Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards or whatever's involved in this with us?
I don't think, and they're not here, but I don't believe currently we have a solution or they have a solution. I think it's going to take the development of something pretty significant in either our regulations, or I definitely think they need to change some regulations as well. Because our license, the apprenticeship program for this industry is very different than other apprenticeship programs. Other apprenticeship programs, for instance, steel workers go into an apprenticeship program. They're working side by side with a journeyman, but they don't then take a test. And our apprentices have to go work with a journeyman, and then they have to take this test. So it's a little different than other apprenticeship programs. And I don't know about other apprenticeship programs, but our journey level is just a licensee that has no fines. So we have absolutely no requirements for who these trainers are, except that they just have a license with no fines.
But that could be correctable.
That's something we can absolutely need to look at.
And what are things we can't correct on our side that would give you doubt?
The things that we can't correct? I think that with the Division of Apprenticeship Standards, there are standards that apprenticeship program sponsors have to go by, and that's what needs to be looked at, which we have very little oversight of.
So we would have to be in communications with them, with these findings, and find out why there isn't a requirement to have the correct textbook for the students.
Right.
You know, I mean, because this is really what you found it. To me, this is 100%. Christy, you found it. That's, I think, what is really happening with the lows.
We have to acknowledge the bad schools in California. Because in my report as well, I've also listed how bad some of the schools we found are producing, even some that are accredited. So there's so much work to have made some progresses, but not looking at it in this way, in a sense.
How is the relationship with the Board of Apprentice?
Good. With the Division of Apprenticeship Standards, it's good. I honestly, they have less staff than we do.
Oh.
So there's issues there.
Sure.
But they're very open to working with us. I definitely think we need to sit down and, yeah.
So for the schools, this data also shows that there's quite a few schools who have low Spanish pass rates who have also low pass rates in all other languages. So are we prioritizing those with our ongoing investigations of the schools? Are we bumping those up?
We haven't yet. We're actually in the process of working on a prioritization of schools. It's something we talk about daily, trying to get together a priority. And again, we haven't looked at it from this aspect because we unfortunately have schools that are selling hours or not necessarily selling hours, but making up hours for the tracking of their students. So those have raised to a level. We have, I'm looking for Debbie. Is she around? There's Debbie in the back. So Debbie is one of our new analysts assigned to schools. So she's actually only been with us a couple weeks. But so we are adding to that unit that we've developed by using some resources from some other units that didn't need them to try to get more of a handle on some of the schools and at least come up with a plan to develop new regulations and see what we can do with that.
Can we do any public shaming? Can we publish like bottom 10 passing schools on Facebook or things like that?
So, you know what's interesting is the worst schools are the best performers. So that's one of the biggest problems, especially for a student. A school that's selling hours has the highest pass rates in all of California because they are putting so many people through that exam, they have memorized the test.
That makes sense.
So it's a catch-22 because we tell students, and we do have a disclaimer now on our website when you go to look for the list of approved schools. We added some information that just, being an approved school, they should also be doing X, Y, and Z. They should be teaching you a full curriculum. That you should have a schedule. We're going into so many schools that the students start whenever they want. Students come in at 8, students come in at 10, students come in whatever days of week they want. And they're providing documentation on their hours and operations, which is absolutely, it's impossible for them to keep. So the worst schools, that even the ones that have recently closed down, had the highest pass rate. So if you're a student, and let's just say you're a student coming into California from another country, you go on there, you're going to usually pick the best school. Anybody would pick the best school, which in fact that could be a red flag.
You're saying by promoting by figuring out the poorest pass rate schools, we are be funneling people into the crappier schools because they've memorized the test.
Right, so that's we're trying to put the information out there to look at, don't just look at the pass rate, look at what type of, I think even we say look around and see if the school's a mess, what kind of education are you getting? Because we've gone into some schools.
Haven't you said like even in some of those schools, they'll have like 2 pedicure things, but yet they have 20 people in there
All the time.
And they're so obviously they're not doing the practical
Right.
part of it and performing the services.
And most people think of a school, we'll use Federico's as an example since I think he left already. But they have a clinic floor, and most schools have what they refer to as the clinic floor. So consumers can go in there and get services from students who are supervised by instructors. Most of these schools that we're finding, they don't provide services to customers. No clinic floor whatsoever.
Right.
And it's not a requirement. That's not a requirement.
Well, that's up to the BPPE.
No, I don't believe the Bureau requires any type of services to be performed on a consumer.
Why? Interesting.
Yeah. Other states require it. Other states, Texas, for example, I believe requires you have to give the square footage of your clinic floor that's open to consumers. But some of the schools we're going into, they're not doing it for that purpose.
How would that be able to change that?
Regulation, that's probably a big change. It's probably not. Right, so we inspect for health and safety because consumers are going in and receiving services. So when we go into a school and it's a room like this and it's just set up with tables and there's nothing to inspect. I mean, we go into schools all the time where there's not any product, no product. Because they're just being taught how to pass the test.
So if we wanted to implement a new requirement like that, would we need to basically work with someone for new legislation?
We'd have to look to see what authority we would have through current statute. I think in the scheme of things, what we would like to see come forward to the board eventually is a significant regulation package to change how we're handling schools right now. We made several recommendations in our sunset report for how we handle schools. We asked for more authority on being in schools and what we can do while we're there. So we need a lot of changes in statute and regulations. I definitely think we have some things we could do in regulation. Because our board has such minimal oversight over these schools, every time we go out to a school, we find something new that we think would require a regulation. So we have draft regulations in a very draft form that we'd like to present, but they keep not being enough. So it's definitely something that we need to get to the board. But keep in mind also that our board doesn't get any funding for schools. So we've managed to create a separate unit to address these issues. So it's very new to us still. We've not done this type of site visits on schools before. We've not gone into schools or even requested documentation from schools on, we only get a proof of training for the application and it says they went to school starting this date to this date. But behind that, they should have all their documentation to prove what they did. There's certain numbers of operations they have to do. There's all this information. So now we're starting to look at that and requesting it. And we're receiving documents from schools that are clearly faked. And so we are taking action. We've met with our Attorney General liaison. We have several cases right now that we are moving forward to the Attorney General's office to take disciplinary action. And that'll be huge for us. I mean, it's a slow process, but we're moving in the right direction to be taking some type of action.
So there's no silver bullets. Even if you drop the practical exam, still have low pass rates in certain of these languages. Even if we flip it, drop the written exam and keep the practical exam, still low pass rates in these languages, correct?
Yes.
Wouldn't, though, health and safety, since that's what we govern, be a part of what those practicals need to be required to be done in these schools?
Oh,
So that-
absolutely.
you know what I mean? That we
The
can't
practical
govern
is
that.
very much targeted at health and safety. The practical exam
Right, so why
looks at
can't
health
we
and safety.
govern that since that's our means, you know,
Mhm.
in the schools?
Well, we should have
Easy answer.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we're talking about Spanish language pass rates and this whole idea of the practical exam. And a lot has come to the surface in this meeting today. A lot of information's in front of us as far as my concern, again, is the Business and Professions Code, the way it reads now. And I'm keeping an open mind as to whether average scoring, weighted average is the right answer, or even the most adequate, or just part of the solution to this whole problem. But I just think the board, as board members, we have to kind of take this on, still take this head on. And as it stands now, are we in compliance with the Business and Profession Code, which states, and this is the sentence that is predominant, in the conduct and grading of examinations, practical demonstration shall prevail over written tests. Now, I know sometimes we can tweak a law to better meet our administrative needs. So we can do this by basing it on other laws or other administrative agencies' decisions, as we have here. But it appears that what we've done as a board, and we've been looking at this for 10 years, and it really hasn't been resolved. I went back to other transcripts of our meeting, and this goes way back. But it seems like we've chosen to wholly and completely ignore the very basis of this law. Do we have discretion on which laws we follow or ignore? Can we pick and choose? But to me, and maybe I'm being a jailhouse lawyer on this, but the code is unambiguous, and to interpret it in any other way is to change the intent of the law and the intent of the legislator here. I don't see the subtlety on this. So can we discuss this in more detail?
Steve, are you saying this in the context of the Spanish language, or it's just in general? Because it doesn't matter, you know.
To me, this is fundamental. I'm saying Spanish language, but this is fundamental to everything we do and how this should be done. It says that we should be grading in a very different format than we are grading all of our exams right now. And I guess there was a recent, that's the study, okay, good. Which indicated that were we to go to this method and follow the legislature's direction there, that we could increase our pass rate by even as simple as a 51-49 ratio here could have an impact on that. And it indicates that the practical examination, they state the practical examination is more important than the written examination with respect to the protection of the public, which is our fundamental goal. So maybe we can talk about how we look at this very fundamental area.
So I think it sounds like there's two questions. One is a compliance question regarding whether or not our board is operating out of compliance, which I think is a question for our legal counsel.
Yes.
The other, which is what Andrew is raising, is the question of the way we are weighting scoring as it pertains to not just Spanish language pass rates, but to pass rates overall, for which we do have a memo that was just agreed upon to become public in terms of the information that was provided to the board. So I'm going to ask Christy to go through the memo that was provided to us by Lee Schroeder. And I'm also going to ask that our legal counsel weigh in on this.
I would actually defer to the creators of the letter. If we could have either Lee or Sean, who are actually here from SMT, come up. And I know we also have Tracy Montez from DCA as well, so I'm sure that they all have something to add. They came all the way from Florida for us.
Thank you.
Great, yes.
I'm Lee Schroeder. I'm here representing Schroeder Measurement Technologies and its parent company, Prometric. And we represent also the National Interstate Council of State Boards of Colleges. And the question was put to me that given the statement of law that you just referenced, what would be the case if we were to follow that rule? Recognizing that what we do now is score this on what's referred to as a non-compensatory basis, where you must pass both, and having more skill in one area doesn't compensate for less in the other. Whereas it appears as though it was in the minds of the folks that passed the law that somehow extra competence, shall we say, in the practical area should compensate for less performance in the written. So I took a look at a one-year period of time. It was, I believe, ending at the end of June 18. And I said, well, what, first of all, are the pass rates for first-time test takers, people that come out of school, they take the written, they take the practical, what percentage of those people are eligible to be licensed? And the statistics are in my note. 62% of the English-speaking, or people that test by the English versions of the exam could become licensed, whereas only 36% of those who choose to test in Spanish could become licensed. And so, looking at this from the standpoint of taking these scores from the two examinations and essentially averaging them with 51% of the weight, just 51% difference, 51% of the weight placed on the practical exam and 49% placed on the written exam, we find that this changes things fairly dramatically to where, in the case of Spanish, 54% of candidates would be eligible based upon their taking the exam the first time. This is a fairly dramatic change. You know, it's 18%, I believe, with the exception of the Vietnamese, which is less. So if the question is, what is the effect of following the law in the most minimal weighting difference possible, this is it. It's pretty substantial.
So right now you're stating it's 50-50 when
No.
taking the test.
Right now, we have a what we call non-compensatory model. You have to pass the written, you have to pass the practical. The scores are not averaged, you must pass both. Whereas this is a weighting, an averaging, if you will, with slightly more weight on the practical.
You make a statement also in your second page of your report, the first paragraph, you say, further, such a weighting does not make it possible for a candidate with a very high score on the practical examination to pass without a meaningful level of performance on the written examination.
Right.
There's that equity between the two.
What I was getting at is, I understand going back a few years before this was separated, there was, I believe, 75% of the weight was placed on the practical exam, and 25% of the weight was placed on the written. And so that certainly was compliant with the law as we understand that statement. Yet you could you could become licensed without really demonstrating any knowledge on the written examination. So by going to a 49-51, we changed that fairly substantially. Again, it was 75%, 25. Moving to 51 and 49, you have to demonstrate some meaningful level of knowledge on the written examination. Well, you know, you have to go pretty high to make a difference. You have to get up into that same 75-25, and then it only raises a little bit. I did do the what if all the way up the line, and I realized by looking at it that, well, first of all, we probably shouldn't be gerrymandering, if you will, the data around to fit our needs so much, but that the thing that made the big difference was the combination of the scores, treating them as compensatory for better performance in one, compensating for poor performance in the other. Almost no matter what weights you put on it, that one change is meaningful and has a significant effect.
Another factor may be, as Christy pointed out earlier, the apprentice programs, where there are such a large number scoring very low. That will definitely skew the numbers as well. I think that's an important factor we cannot omit from this discussion as well.
Another question, 30 years ago, we used to score, you said 75, 25, 70, yes,
Yeah, well, there were 300 points assigned to the practical and 100
years
to the
ago.
written. Yeah.
I think that's when I took it, which was 30 years ago. So I was trying to remember how it's changed. Thank you. Why did why did we change over to these different methods?
Let's welcome Tracy Montez.
Absolutely.
I can tell you exactly why you changed over to those methods, because a criterion reference non-compensatory model is the best model for licensing exams. I doubt, although I haven't done any research lately, that you'll find many licensing exams that use a compensatory model. Most programs have certain standards in place, expectations that are based on entry-level standards. What are those minimum standards that a candidate must achieve in order to practice safely and competently? And your program has a list of those that must be achieved. So way back when, there was a decision made to have what's called a criterion reference passing score for your written test and your practical test. And each one of those pass points must be achieved in order for a candidate to become licensed. And we took away the compensatory model because, again, we found that because it was so weighted, so extreme, that there were candidates who could fail the written and still become licensed by passing a practical exam. And we know that practical exams tend to be less standardized, less reliable, much harder to score. And so it was very important to the board at that time to keep both a written and a practical.
So in my layman's terms, if I had a SAT score of 1200, there's a difference between a 600 in verbal, 600 math, and an 800 in verbal and a 400 in math, basically.
Right.
But to the outside, it looks like 1200, pretty darn good score. You wouldn't want to trust me with a number.
Right. And I believe those tests, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're normative. They use data based upon the students. Here, the criterion is what an individual must do to practice safely and competently. It doesn't fluctuate. It's a objective criterion. And so that's where I get concerned about adjusting 51, 49. Oh, do we want to go down to 48 so we get that higher passing rate? Because our standards, which I know Schroeder follows, specifically says that regulatory boards should not gatekeep. They should not adjust passing scores or passing rates arbitrarily to allow individuals to enter into the field, that it should be a criterion reference based. And there's case law on that. So I'm going to go to the legal part real quick before your counsel jumps in, and also gently remind him that we have Business and Professions Code Section 139. And I know for a fact that when the legislators put prevail in there, they were not advised by a psychometrician. And luckily, we've come a long way, and we now have Business and Professions Code Section 139. And we do advise legislators now and then when we have the opportunity about psychometric standards, because again, that's based on case law. If there are hearings, whether it's at a national level, state level, whether it's regulation, whether it's private industry, selection, federal, you name it, they're going to go to this case law and they're going to look at the precedents that have been put forward and that are based on research and so forth. So while I know that this board struggles with the word prevail, I can tell you again, it's not a psychometric term. And I'd like to think that the validity and all of the wonderful research that Schroeder has done to support your examinations, would those decisions, those passing score decisions, would stand.
You said it's not the role of the board to gatekeep. Is it the role of the legislature to gatekeep?
I would say no, not based on testing. I mean, if they're looking at regulation and public safety, they have to look at what is appropriate for standards for health and safety. And your licensees and your board, they make those decisions too, but you don't gatekeep in terms of arbitrarily adjusting the passing score. Yes, you would establish regulations to protect consumers, but it wouldn't be a test-by-test case.
It
So
would
what you
appear-
do is you do your occupational analysis that's based on your scope of practice that identifies those important tasks and skills and knowledges that you have to know upon licensure. Then you develop your test based on that, and that's what should govern those decisions. Now, if every time you gave a test and you changed that and said, well, this isn't going to be as important, or we want to take that content out of the test, or we want to adjust it, and the board was doing that, that's where you'd have problems.
So it appears that you're in conflict with where the legislature is on this, or what the business and profession code. I mean, it's like we're doing two different things here. One is the code, the law that we have to adhere to, and the other is scientific testing that what would be best in this
I think
area.
it's the interpretation of the word prevail is what I'm concerned with, is that when that was established, there wasn't guidance on the appropriate use of that language. So the board has chosen to use section 139 to help them address the word prevail and how that's been interpreted.
Can we discuss that then?
I mean, I'll go back to that overarching question of whether or not the board's in compliance with the law. Are we violating anything? Because this one's it's a tough question to ask, and it's a tough answer to respond because it's not clear cut. What I can say is that the board is in substantial compliance in terms of not only the Business and Professions Code 7338, but also Business and Professions Code 139 as referenced by Dr. Tracy Montez, because we can't just look at our Practice Act, the board's Practice Act, in a vacuum. There are other statutes, there are other factors that we have to take into account. And based on my review, the board is substantially complying, meaning struggling with these two different code sections and trying to be lawful. Because what we're looking for the board is something that's legally defensible. And the board, working with the Office of Professional Examination Services, we've done this in the years past. We've decided this is the course to take because, quite frankly, the language in 7338 is vague. What is prevail? There's nothing that says you have to have a certain amount of a score or you do one over the other. It doesn't even say how do we do it in terms of not only the grading but the conduct of the examinations. So that's why it's vague in that it needs more interpretation, meaning it needed a reg in order to fully say we're complying because we have this language in the statute and then we have regulations on how to implement what does prevail mean. But absent having any regs, that's why we rely on our psychometric data, on the advice of OPES, and to determine how are we working best to implement this code section, because it's not just saying, and I argue this, is that it's not saying that every single time you're going to have practical demonstrations that always overrides everything else. I don't believe that's what it can say, especially given that Business and Professions Code 139 says that we have to have some policies that were developed that pertain to, among other things, the setting of passing standards. So if you have that advice saying, well, you can't say automatically that you have the practical demonstrations surpass all the time, then the board has to acknowledge that and find a course. And I think that's where we come into substantial compliance. I think the board currently is legally defensible if this ever did go into a court of law, that we have enough support at this time, given the statutes, given the data that we have, as well as the recommendations of OPES to say we are in substantial compliance with the law.
And I'd like to add too, because I know, I mean, this has been going on for longer than 10 years. It's been going on for at least as long as I've been around, which is 25. The board is certainly welcome if the executive officer is open, is to look at just the whole format of your test. You have a written, you have a practical, perhaps combining them so it's one test. you do a practical demonstration, and then somehow you articulate some of those concepts, those knowledge concepts captured on a written test. So rather than having to deal with compensation or some model or two different tests, there's a way to address the concerns you're having about the differences of pass rate and things like that. I do think that there's a much bigger picture here with the apprentice program and some other issues with regard to language and translation. But rather than just trying to go back to this one statute here, why don't you just take a look at your exams and how you're doing them? I mean, we went to computer-based testing. That was a huge, huge change. And maybe now it's time to look at something a little different in terms of one exam versus two. Something to think about. But I've done audits of your national exam programs. They're very strong. They've got just great information for candidates, and somehow we just have to get that to them, to the students and the schools, because if they do what is being asked of them, if they take the time to learn the material and to see what's published out there, they should be able to do well. And I think that that is my concern, is they're not led in the right direction.
Are you suggesting that if we go to the concept of one test, that essentially there could be some sort of internalized weighting in that one test that could
That's
offset?
a possibility, yes. Or again, to combine them. So as you're doing your practical demonstration, you're articulating again some of those concepts in greater detail that are on the written tests. Again, a way to streamline but still protect consumers. How can we address the need to get candidates licensed fairly and know that we have this disparate situation with the written and the practical, but again, we don't want to not measure or assess the written, those concepts.
So the concept would be that we could go to a one test, we could
Possibly,
go to a
yes.
one test
Possibly,
format
yes.
and essentially negate our problem with the word prevail there, because we could adjust it inside that one test format.
Possibly, but I would work closely with Christy and your legal counsel to make sure that any changes are made. But again, this is something that we would do in consultation with your vendor, with Schroeder, and also, again, your subject matter experts, your licensees, because they're a very important process whenever we do exam development, is to have their input and how it's best to measure these. So you have your board, you have your licensees, and your psychometricians, all three groups together.
Could I ask you your thought on a one exam format to accomplish our needs here?
Well, I don't want to make this sound like an argument.
Okay.
It's somewhat hard to visualize the context of that, the mechanics of that, because it would seem we would have some sort of a facility where there would be demonstration of skills similar to the practical, and then you would do something to collect some cognitive information, and then move on to perhaps another demonstration. And so at the end of the day, you're doing kind of the same thing as combining the scores.
It's semantics.
Again, you're just doing it more efficiently by doing all the demonstration over here and the cognitive information over here on the written exam.
Or maybe even together, sorry to interrupt, somehow together, again, just kind of brainstorming.
So I just want,
I'm sorry.
please finish.
Well, I was just going to say, everything Tracy has said is correct. I can't disagree with the notion that the examinations are developed and the standards are established from a criterion reference perspective. The meaning that we've created the examination, and then we look at that examination and say, what do you have to do to pass? What are the, what is enough? And it's not done arbitrarily or capriciously. It's done by looking at what the elements are that are there. And yet, if we have a cognitive exam, a written examination where we have, let's say, 50% of it is science and 25% is health and safety and 25% is products, let's say, you set one cut score for the whole exam. If someone is very, very good in science and not so good in health and safety, they can still pass because one compensates for the other within the exam. So I don't believe that it is inherently wrong to combine the scores across the two types of examinations. But as these exams were conceived, Tracy's absolutely correct that they were conceived as criterion referenced individually.
Thank you. Yeah.
Since it's a national exam, how are other states doing it?
Other states, in my experience, aren't seeing the, or valuing, maybe I should say, the difference in performance that you are observing in the same way. I'm not saying that that's good for them. This is a problem. We see the candidates that are trained in other languages to have certain deficiencies. And with respect to Spanish as an example, we've been through the translation aspect of that backwards and forwards, and we've looked at every possible way that this could have been in some way flawed. And we come back to the fact that for whatever reason, these folks can't seem to read this stuff. Now, one really good idea would be to toggle the content. Most people that are taking the Spanish examination are choosing to take it. They might be trained in English, but they say, oh, I'm going to take it in Spanish. These people are bilingual, fundamentally, and the exam can and should be presented in a bilingual way, where a candidate could read it in Spanish, then read it in English, and decide, well, based upon my best understanding now of what they're asking me, this is my answer.
And we currently do that in a number of other areas and a number of other clients. And it can be done for any language that's out there. Any language that the exam is translated in, the entire screen would be displayed in that language. All the buttons, all the little prompts, and then they can toggle to English just for a better relational understanding of what the terms are.
I have a really weird question here. Have we ever had anybody who's blind try to take the exam? And what accommodations do we make for them, if so? Because I was just wondering, besides the toggling between English and Spanish, what if you could toggle between the word and oral, somebody asks you the question orally as opposed to trying to read it. You might be able to.
I don't know how somebody in this field would work if they couldn't see.
Yeah, I know, that's why I said it was really strange, but I was trying to wonder if there's a way to.
In other professions, we would provide a reader, somebody who is professional and can accurately pronunciate the words, although they cannot be related to the field.
And we have that as well. We have, we have ADA that we follow, that we have had candidates that have had to use readers before.
And I think there was a comment earlier during the public comment about accommodations for the written and why not the practical, and they are for both. So accommodations are made, and for the most part, they tend to be accepted as long as they don't change the format of the test or the assessment, and the state is very good about that. And we do see some of these patterns with our acupuncture board, where again, they may be trained in English, but then they choose to take the exam in Mandarin or something, and they don't do as well. And so then they go back and they take it in English and they pass. And then as far as the toggling, we will have a new computer-based testing contract in place by the end of this year. And that is a priority, and I anticipate that we'll be able to have that option. So I think that will help as well.
Can I make a suggestion?
But I wonder, can you incorporate screen reading in that so you don't have to have an individual, but you plug in your headset and Siri tells me what's on the screen, kind of a thing?
It's not Siri, but there are programs that are included in the software.
They are, so we could
Can read.
give that a possibility, is hearing it orally as opposed to trying to read it might.
But you just have to be careful, because some of the programs, even like you hear your GPS or Siri, cannot pronounce the words accurately. So you want to ensure that the candidate does have a fair advantage, or the same
fair
not
point, yeah.
disadvantaged in any way.
Correct.
By the accommodation.
Can I suggest, I'm intrigued by what Tracy said about the possibility of looking at this one exam format. Can we continue, we're not going to be obviously making a decision on that today, but can we continue the process of that being a possible solution to our problem, I guess my problem with the business and profession codes? Can we continue working that out and maybe have a report back at our next board meeting, or
Can I make a suggestion? I think from just what I'm hearing, it sounds like there is a bigger need than just looking at scoring. In terms of reviewing the exam and what other states are doing and whether or not the exam itself is what and how we should be testing right now. And I do think we have a licensing and exam committee. Can we ask that the committee take this up as something to look at into detail and then bring that to the board? Because I think it's a conversation that is rather lengthy, so it might be worth diving into in a more detailed manner. And I want to kind of remove it from the agenda item this is actually on, which is the Spanish language task force. And the Spanish language exam issue, which I understand is where the big question kind of came from and is rooted in. But I think that we are now on two separate tracks, because from what we're seeing in terms of data, the Spanish language exam and those pass-fail rates are really, there's some things that are pointing to the apprenticeship and school issues being a huge factor. And I think that the exam question that we have may play a much smaller part of that. I'm not saying it's not a factor, but it sounds like there are two major issues that we really need to address for Spanish language test takers first and foremost. And then look at the exam in detail, especially with the new toggle option and seeing how that plays out. And maybe having the committee look into other questions we may want to raise and take to a more detailed level.
when does that committee meet again?
I think it's
We can schedule
up to
anytime.
Special.
Yeah.
Does that sound
Just
good?
curious, just curious who's currently on chair of that committee, do we know?
I don't think we
Joe?
established it, right?
We did establish it. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we might need to.
You might need to go back and look at our
Right.
committee assignments
It,
and
well, it could.
reassign
We've
some
obviously
people.
lost some members,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, because I think we had tabled the votes for the committees from
Right.
January because we're not a full board right now.
Right.
And if I may, it will take some time, to research this out, so I would, appreciate that, recognizing that. But I also think that this is a real plus to share possibly at the sunset hearing, that you are looking at your exam structure, because there is so much pressure right now to deregulate. And I just think it's great when you can say, hey, we're looking at our Spanish passing rate, we're looking at our exams, our written and practical, how can we do these things more efficiently, yet still protect consumers, get our students through. So I think it's just a really great example of that balance between being fair, improving the economy, and protecting the public, so.
I also think that the legislature would appreciate a one exam concept, rather than, now they have to pass two exams to wash my hair, and now if it's just one exam, at least we're.
But I would like to point out, just changing the exam is not the solution to the problem, because you still have the administration side. And now you have a lot of flexibility where candidates can go take the test. But if you change the model, that's probably going to increase, it will increase the length of the exam. It will more than likely increase the wait time for people to take the exam. I think there's a lot of other factors in there just then to say, let's find a more efficient model for this to solve this problem, as Lisa mentioned earlier. I think there are other factors that have to be investigated as well. I don't think it's a bad thing to say, we are looking to see if this is the best exam model that's out there. And if it is, awesome. If it's not, we can discuss it. But I do think it's more than just looking at this and saying, oh, we need to change the format of the exam.
I completely agree. I think it's more than just looking at how are we scoring the exam, but whether or not the exam needs to be updated in any other way so that it is easier to access in general and also actually addresses what the economic need is and especially what some of the legislators have concerns with. Okay. Public comment. Fred.
We didn't need to sit here for this, right? All right.
Thank you so much.
Fred Jones, for the record, Professional Beauty Federation, California. You guys covered a lot. I can't respond to it all. Let me just jump to the bottom line, and then I'll hit a couple of things lightly. I think the answer is combining the score of the written and the practical. Don't change the format. Don't change anything. Just have one cut score. And within that test, if you do really well on the practical, but not so well on the written, it will compensate within that single test score. So I think that's, and don't even weight it. Don't give it 51, 49, 75, 25. Just give one test score and one cut score, I should say. So I don't think you would have to change the administration with one caveat. Right now, if you fail the written, but you pass the practical, you don't have to take both. Or you would just have to go and take the written. So if you don't reach the cut score, maybe you could have an option of them only retaking one portion and not the other. So I think there's a way to do this without reformatting the entire exam. It's just combining both scores with one passage score. I will say just legally, there is a general provision that lays out the general responsibilities of the Department of Consumer Affairs. And one of the sections that was referenced was Section 139. That talks about the Department of Consumer Affairs, quote unquote, consulting with each of their boards and commissions when it comes to these issues and other issues. 7338 in the same business code is very specific to your board, not just the department's consultation role. Moreover, 7338 is explicit about what you're supposed to do for grading purposes of your licensing exam. So it's clear to me, any court looking at this would say 7338 for purposes of you and grading of your exam prevails over any general DCA code section. That's just one legal opinion, but if you have two lawyers in the room, you'll have at least four contrary opinions. My organization's primary concern is to preserve the practical exam. We think it should prevail, but at the very least, it should exist. And I'm here to tell you there are powerful individuals in the state capitol that have and continue to deliberate in real time about getting rid of the practical exam. So the sooner this board acts to go back to a single score, the better my job will be in preserving our practical test. We don't want the practical test to go away because we think, as the policymakers that drafted 7338 thought, that if you can't demonstrate your health and safety protocols, it doesn't matter how much you can regurgitate in a written exam. You're not safe. So the practical is very important for my organization. On the toggle option, I'm buoyed to hear that there may be some conversation as the test vendor. That's PSI right now. I don't know if PSI offers a toggle option. I do know that Prometric, that owns SMT, does offer that in other states. So they are doing that in real time. So maybe that's a conversation for DCA to have with PSI. And Prometric, which is quite bigger than PSI, does do that in other states, I know for a fact. Apprentices, I just wanted to clarify, they do in statute require apprentices to receive 220 hours of classroom instruction. And that is specifically called out to be health and safety instruction and curriculum. Nobody's enforcing that. So that's technically on DAS. So there's an issue of oversight as much as there is reformulating the apprenticeship program. I will say though, it's helpful for me to tell policymakers that want to deregulate us, delicense us, that there are these alternative means to licensure that does allow a student after 39-hour program to begin earning while they're learning through an apprenticeship program. So I would hate, just as a talking point, to lose the apprenticeship program in these continuous de-licensure efforts in the legislature. Schools, again, sole oversight for you guys is the answer. BPPE, they're just generalists. They don't understand our school. You guys need the oversight. And having an enrollment of all students that come in will correct selling of hours. But anyway, to reiterate, I just hope we get back to a point of having one cut score so that I can tell policymakers there's not 2 licensing exams, there's only 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I have a flight at 3:55.
Should I-
Oh, and I
You
know
and I
we have
both.
some regulations we have to vote on.
And
So-
we need a quorum here we need a quorum to do it, so we'll
Right.
pop
Oh, so
through
you
it.
have a flight too.
Yeah,
Okay.
same thing.
So I just realized we were hitting 3 o'clock.
All right, let's try to speed this up, but
I won't be
please.
long. My name is Janice Moses, and I'm from Blake Austin College. We're in Vacaville, and I wanted to just speak a little bit in regard to what you've been talking about. I really appreciate hearing the conversation and what it is that you're trying to be able to do, the concerns that you have. I would like to be able to speak about quality of education. It's pretty hard to be able to sit and hear that the quality of education is of concern. I do know that the quality of education is of concern. And I think that with the population that we serve, these are people who are more of the doers than the bookwork type of people. And so I think that the written test is much more difficult for them to be able to accomplish. But I would encourage you not to diminish that, because it is in the learning of the sciences and learning of the health and safety that makes that other side of the brain function. It produces a much higher caliber of cosmetologist, esthetician, or nail tech. And I appreciate everyone having a perspective, but I think it's important for a student who has graduated to have to take a written examination as well as a practical examination. We want to be able to produce the absolute best in this industry. And if we water down what it is that we are expecting of them, then we are watering down these professions. And I have to say that whether you're a lawyer or you're a scientist or a cosmetologist, all of these are important positions to be able to hold. And we want our cosmetologists to be as smart and as capable as the other industries. So from my perspective, don't weight the written versus don't combine them. We did that when we were first open, and you're absolutely right. You can get anybody to pass, but that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for people who are intelligent. They're using chemicals. They are touching people's skin. They have the ability to be able to damage. And so we want to be able to elevate what it is that they're learning, and the written is just as important as the practical is. So let's not dummy down the profession, and let's not look for ways to be able to diminish things. Let's elevate the educational component. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, if no further public comment, I'm going to move on to our next agenda item. Let's take a 2-minute break. Thank you. 2-minute break. We're back and going on to agenda item number 13, legislative update.
So we have several bills to look at. I want to just make a quick reminder that we can take a position of watch on these bills. If we have a lot of bills coming to us that specifically impact us, but that we should be paying attention to. Or, of course, support or oppose, or support if amended, oppose if amended, things like that. Okay, so AB 5 is to codify the Dynamax decision. It's basically taking that decision that developed the ABC test and putting it into law.
And
Would you like to watch?
We have no position on it at all?
We currently have no position. And again, obviously it impacts our industry greatly, but not our board. There's no work for us to do on it, so there's no impact to our board, but it obviously impacts the industry.
I move that we watch it.
Okay. Public comment?
I would agree that you watch it because it's all with the DIR anyways.
Right.
I mean, honestly, it's within labor compliance. And it is a massive problem in the industry. It's absolutely massive. And what follows behind it is tax evasion. And I feared that eventually that will roll back to you because if we're not paying our taxes to you, you report our license to the tax guy and then we're all out of business. And we tend to be folks that are not so great at doing business, but we do a lot of really great things with hair and skin and other things like that. So I would suggest that you watch it, but it does have a giant impact on eventually your licensees. So thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? If not, I will move to a board vote. I'm going to start on my right.
Jackie, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Andrew Drapkin, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Moving to the next bill is AB 193, which we currently have an opposed position on. This was the bill that was deregulating several of our services. And we'll tell you that that bill has been pulled from the committee. I would just recommend we maintain our opposed position.
So there's been no changes to it at all?
There was changes to it since our last meeting, but they have,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
The next bill is AB 496, which is a business and professions bill. This bill replaces gendered terms with non-gendered terms, requires DCA to develop a report to Senate and Assembly BMP. I recommend we support.
I move to support.
I second.
Public comment? No public comment, so I'll move to a board vote, starting on my left.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Andrew Drapkin, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Our next bill is AB 613, which is also by Assemblymember Lowe. This bill authorizes each board within DCA to increase every 4 years any fee by the amount not to exceed the increase in the California Consumer Price Index. No impact to us. I don't see us anytime soon having to do anything with our fees. I would recommend we support.
I support.
Second.
All right, public comment? No public comment, so I'll go to a board vote, starting on my right.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Andrew Drapkin, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Our next bill is AB 817 by Assemblymember Kiley, which is a bill I personally love. However, it has been recently pulled from the hearing by the author. And I do think, though, that we will hear this again if the board is so inclined. I would recommend we still support this bill because it makes some significant changes in bringing us into the year 2019 for mobile units. And I do think this will be discussed in sunset.
Yes. I move that we support.
Second.
Public comment?
Jamie Schrabeck, Precision Nails. Just one quick thing on the mobile units. A definition for enclosed, because I could see someone coming up with, converting their horse trailer or coming up with something that might fit into, for example, the Safe Sidewalk Vending Act, where they may have this mobile cart where they're setting up on a sidewalk and doing beauty services by having someone sit on a stool. And is that enclosed? What is that exactly? So I don't think that word is well defined, and I think we're going to run into problems if we don't define it.
additional public comment? Okay. If none, I will move to a board vote, starting on my left.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Andrew Drapkin, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
And Christy, can we take that feedback to the author's office?
Sure will.
Thank you.
Next bill is AB 1271, Assemblymember Deep, which this bill is a department bill that requires the department to report on various aspects of licensing examinations.
We already do this, right? And it's for DCA?
Right, it's for DCA and it would pertain to all boards. I would recommend we watch it.
I move to watch.
All right.
I second.
Public comment? No public comment, so I will go to a board vote, starting on my right.
Right, we're starting on the right.
Board vote.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Andrew Drapkin, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Our next bill is AB 1607 by Borner Harvath, and this bill requires gender discrimination information. We already currently do this based on a bill that came out a couple years ago, but this bill actually expands that information to the cities, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Sorry. Right, so we think it's just increasing awareness, doesn't impact us directly, something that we already do that would just be expanded for regarding gender discrimination. I would recommend we support.
Say we watch.
Okay, so I hear a
Or
watch
support.
or support. Okay.
I'll second the support.
Support.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Public comment.
Jamie Strabeck, Precision Nails. Obviously, we're not changing the original law, the Gender Tax Repeal Act, but I will point out that the language is very sloppy because it refers to barbers or hair salons in the law. And barbers is a category of licensure, that's a person. A hair salon is a type of establishment. Obviously, you can offer different things. So if we were to make this really relate to us, I wish this law originally had said something, for every business that offers services that are regulated by the BBC, as opposed to picking out just particular categories. If it doesn't apply to the entire board, I think it's problematic.
So, support if amended.
Thank you.
With that clarification.
I think we can have Christy give that feedback to the bill author.
Definitely.
Okay. Additional public comment on this? Okay. All right, then I will move to a board vote, starting on my left.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Andrew Drapkin, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Next bill is SB 238 by Senator Grove. This bill is talking about the Dynamex as well, and it actually spells out different factors for determining how you fit into that decision. So I can tell you that this bill did fail its passage in the hearing. Reconsideration was granted, but
Is this in contradiction to the last bill on?
Trying to
So
make a carve out.
yeah, it's a carve-out. So this, provides for the actual, it gives these listed factors for determining where you fall into the independent contractor versus an employee.
It's a Senate bill.
It is.
I say we watch it,
Well, it was.
if we're gonna take a position.
But it's being reconsidered, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, watch.
I would say watch. So, need a motion?
I move we watch.
I second it. Okay, public comment. No public comment, so I will move to a vote, starting on my right.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Andrew Drapkin, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
And lastly, we have SB 607, which currently is written, increases the number of our health and safety board members on that committee from 2 to 3. This is a bill that we believe would be the vehicle to be used for our sunset extension.
I move we support.
Second?
Public comment? No public comment. Okay, so moving to board vote, starting on my right.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Andrew Draskin, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Never start in the middle. You always start on the left or the right.
Next time I'll start in the middle, Andrew. Okay, so I think that's it for legislative updates. Okay. Moving on to agenda item 14, proposed regulations.
So I'm going to give a quick update on things that don't need board action. Our status updates are for definition of access, transfer of credit or training, and personal service permit. Those are all regulatory packages that the board has already approved. Those are currently going through the DCA internal review process, so those are moving through the process. And then we're currently working on the regulation packages for the filing documents that from there, then they go to DCA for internal review for our translation guide as well as our extern language, which the board approved at their last meeting. Action items that we need today, we have 3 separate action items that we need. One is kind of combined. We have our new substantial relationship criteria as well as our new disciplinary guidelines. The board recently approved our revision to the disciplinary guidelines. However, AB 2138 was passed last year. That was the one that originally we opposed because it was going to require fingerprint cards, but then they modified that. And what we had to do was change our substantial relationship guidelines as well as rehabilitation guidelines. We've worked extensively with our legal office to correct this language. And it's language for regulations. So the first one that you see is section 970, where we talk about the substantial relationship criteria. And then we also have, past the blue paper, you have the disciplinary guidelines because we reference the new version of disciplinary guidelines in regulation as well. So it's updating that date. And then we've included the disciplinary guidelines and listed everything that has an addition to it. So we would need a motion to approve.
I motion to approve.
I'll second.
Public comment? No public comment, then I'll move to a board vote. I'll start with Andrew, and then we'll go this way.
Andrew Draskin, aye.
Lisa Tong, yes?
Steve Weeks, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Okay.
And then the last action item that we have on regs is for section, for our fine schedule and payment plans. Again, you've seen this language before. However, in the internal review process, we have had to make a couple changes to where the fines apply, either to the establishment owner or to the individual. And those are in red. You can see them within the fine schedule package on pages 5 and 7.
I motion to approve.
I'm so say 5
I'll
and 7.
second.
5 and 6.
Okay. Public comment? No public comment. I'll move to a board vote, and I will start with Steve.
Says yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Andrew Draskin, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Okay, so I guess we're done for proposed regulations? We're done. Okay, any agenda items for the next meeting?
Yeah, the ones we already talked about.
I guess.
We'll have that on there.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll have more members at the next meeting. Because you need to bring in Burbank. Yes.
August?
Burbank. August. August what?
Come on.
I was probably in here.
Can we talk more about the business and profession codes issue?
I think that's been assigned to committee. All right, if nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting at 3:06.
Ooh-wee, what a day.
Thank you.